When you think of Sonic, you might picture a blue hedgehog running around and fighting a mad doctor. You might also think of Shadow, and how people claim he is the best written character within the franchise. Or perhaps you'll think of Silver, and how his potential was squandered and met in place with ridicule. Either way, it's clear that these characters have left their mark on a franchise filled with wild adventures, mystical items of chaos, and characters from across time and space. It is through their history that the franchise has thrived, and through their legacies that Sonic is what he is today. The Blue Blur, The Fastest Thing Alive, Night of the Wind, and Blue Justice? You've probably heard of all of these titles before, but none were as personified as Sonic the Hedgehog. Being the titular character, Sonic is considered one of the most iconic video game characters to ever walk, much less run, over the earth. But his story has taken many turns and loops across the span of over 30 years, whether it be through his numerous games, expansive comic runs, or his surprising rise through cinema. Most Sonic fans know the origin of the Blue Blur, being a mascot from 1991 in the second console war with Sega and Nintendo, to becoming one of the most iconic gaming characters in history. But no one could have ever predicted how far he would go in the changing tides of gaming history. With the rise of the first home consoles and Nintendo being the leader with Mario, Sega had to come up with a mascot that could rival the plumber both in popularity and console sales. With a few sketches and the need for speed, Nato Oshima, Yuji Naka, and Hirokazu Yashira would create Sonic the Hedgehog on the Sega Genesis. On June 23rd, the legend was born, and with it a newfound confidence in taking on some of the most popular video game franchises of all time. The story would begin in Green Hill Zone, where the mad doctor Ivo Robotnik, later known as Dr. Eggman, would seek to conquer the world by making animals power sources for his creations, leaving Sonic to stop the mad doctor, creating a rivalry that would define the franchise for many years. Along the way came some of his iconic friends, the first being the two-tailed fox, Miles Tails Prowler, a smart kid that admired the Blue Hedgehog and helped him on his adventure in Sonic 2 to become Super Sonic after finding the 7 Chaos Emeralds. Later came Knuckles the Echidna in Sonic 3, and Knuckles, an enemy later turned friend after Eggman tricked the Echidna and took the Master Emerald, which Sonic was able to reclaim in the forgotten Hyper form. The last to join Sonic in this classic era was Amy Rose, a pink hedgehog with a huge crush on Sonic, that would join the fight against Metal Sonic, Eggman's finest creation. This era would give Sonic an origin that wasn't just about a person standing up for others, but a friend that loved adventure and was willing to take down Eggman, no matter how strong or powerful he was. At this time, Sonic was soaring to fame with comics and TV shows based on his adventures, and for some time, nothing was going to stop him, until 3D games began to take flight. This left Sonic far behind in 2D as rivals like Mario made the leap to 3D, and PlayStation entered the fray with Crash Bandicoot and Lara Croft. It was rumored that Sonic would not be able to make the transition to 3D and thrive as he did in the classic era. That is, until 1999, when the Sega Dreamcast was made and a new adventure would unfold. Once the era of 3D games began, Sonic would later join the fray after a rough development cycle with the Dreamcast and Sonic Adventure. It was the first official 3D Sonic game with full-on voice actors and a fully fleshed out story. Sonic was given more of an edge to his personality, partly thanks to Ryan Jumpman's voice work, and would take on one of his biggest enemies yet, Perfect Chaos. With the help of his friends, Sonic would beat the water monster thanks to the power of the Chaos Emeralds, saving the day once again. While the game was a rough start into 3D landscape gaming, it set a new golden standard for Sonic, not only in style, but also in storytelling, introducing new lore that has been used in the franchise ever since. But this era of adventure wouldn't stop there, as Sonic Adventure 2 would arrive on the 10th anniversary of the franchise in 2001. Sonic's life of adventure was now challenged by a newly awakened Shadow the Hedgehog, who would team up with Dr. Eggman to unleash the Eclipse Cannon upon the world for the death of his friend Maria Robotnik from 50 years ago. After a few confrontations, Shadow would soon join Sonic in stopping the cannon from destroying Earth, but at the cost of Shadow being lost in the fight. It would not be the only thing that Sonic lost that day, as Sega would lose the console wars, and the Dreamcast was the last Sega console to be made, forcing Sonic to join multiple platforms to survive the rest of the 2000s. And in 2003, Sonic Heroes would be the first multi-platform Sonic game, bringing Sonic and his friends into different teams to take on Metal Sonic and his rise to power as Metal Overlord. It was the first Sonic game to receive a rather mixed reception that had great music and overall good story, but had poor gameplay that resulted in bad controls and heavy repetition of levels. While this wasn't an issue for Sega, a crack would emerge from development in the next two games that would forever affect the franchise, leaving the Adventure era as the last reminder of Sonic's glory days before the dark times, before 2006. Around 2005 and 2006, two Sonic games would not only be critically panned, but receive mixed reception from the wider gaming audience, leading to the eventual downfall of Sonic. The first would be Shadow the Hedgehog, as it would not only receive negative reviews, but it would also become a divided title among fans for its edgy tone and poor gameplay. While Sonic was a part of the story, his role was either put aside as an extra character, or was considerably nerfed. However, the worst was Sonic the Hedgehog 2006, dubbed by fans as Sonic 06. Unlike other Sonic titles, 06 had the reputation as one of the worst Sonic games of all time, for its rushed development, and perhaps one of the more iconic moments was Sonic's romance with Princess Elise, who was a human. This decision made fans very frustrated, which didn't help as Sonic's story was the weakest among the three storylines. Needless to say, Sonic 06 brought Sonic to a new low, one that unfortunately carried over the franchise for many years. It even passed on to Sonic Unleashed and the storybook titles, making Sonic's attempts of capturing his glory years prior near impossible. But in the midst of the Dark Age, fans find that Sonic's edge and charm never changed, some even preferring his characterization from Unleashed over multiple modern depictions, that and Jason Griffith's voice acting. Unfortunately, this didn't help Sega with their dilemma of having multiple flops in several years, and with a new Sonic game engine made in the darkest time, many wondered where Sonic would go, until 2010. In 2010, Sonic would be brought out of the Dark Ages by two great titles, with concerning consequences that would bring the franchise to a new low beyond what they had predicted. This era began with Sonic Colors, a Wii exclusive title in 2010, utilizing a modified version of the Hedgehog engine, taking on a much lighter tone compared to previous games, even going so far as to recast everyone apart from Mike Pollock as Eggman. While it gave Sonic a breath of fresh air from the darker stories, it introduced dialogue that was, for lack of a better term, childish. Sonic was written more as a cartoon hero, with cheesy one-liners, lacking the care and depth from previous games. This would be extended into Sonic Generations in 2011, one of the best Sonic games of all time, being a celebration of Sonic's history up to 20 years. While it brought back the classic gameplay through classic Sonic, it kept much of the boost formula and writing from modern Sonic, making the story skippable by many, but the levels were undeniably the best in the series. Unfortunately though, the success of Sonic Generations led to multiple titles throughout the 2010s that received similar writing with Sonic being seen more as a joke than an actual hero. Even the spin-off series Sonic Boom received 2 games that were on par with 06 in both quality and writing. And Sonic Lost World would be an example of Sonic being portrayed as reckless and had hardly any character growth during the story. Ultimately, Sonic began to lose interest in the public eye, resulting in Sonic Forces being the final mistake. While it had decent gameplay, even repeating generations by bringing back classic gameplay with boost formula, the story was the worst it had ever been, wasting a villain with tremendous potential, as well as giving Sonic, Shadow, and Silver the worst character writing in history. It hurt the franchise so much that many within Sega didn't know if Sonic would ever make a comeback again, until a hidden project emerged, successfully sparking hope for the franchise once again. With the success of the Sonic movies, Sonic Team and Sega released the next mainline game in 2022, being 5 years after Sonic Forces, that game being Sonic Frontiers. Writing would be handled by comic writer Ian Flynn, who worked with Sonic ever since his career in 2006 with Archie Comics, specializing in character writing and referential callbacks. That and the new open zone gameplay that fans later dubbed Frontiers Formula, making Frontiers one of the highest selling Sonic games of all time, creating a new era for Sonic. Apart from having a deeper tone and voice, Sonic no longer had crazy jokes for every situation he was in, but he regained more of his early personality and had a more mature approach to helping his friends compared to previous adventures. This style of writing was received extremely well when it came to the supporting cast, like Tails and Knuckles, though some, like Amy Rose and Dr. Eggman, would receive mixed reactions. Overall, without its success, many within Sega suggested that it would have been truly the end for Sonic, and he would have faded away into obscurity. It became somewhat a rebirth for Sonic, as not only did it bring back much of Sonic's often overlooked villains in the 2000s, but it also gave old concepts and character arcs from the 2010s a second chance, with fan acclaim. And many hope that this new frontier continues on to the next game, and that Sonic stays true to the wind. Amidst his time in the games, Sonic would gain another following within the world of comics, showing different sides to the hero that were either praised as his best or conflicting with his nature in the games. After Sonic's debut in the gaming world, he would receive his first ever comic run with Archie Comics. Taking inspiration from the cartoons of the 90s, Archie Sonic would lead the charge against the tyrannical Dr. Robotnik, with the help of Sally Acorn and the Freedom Fighters in their quest to free Mobius from his tyranny. And after many battles, they would succeed in defeating their Robotnik, but then an alternate variant of the Doctor made his way into Mobius, and through several bodies and alien magic, this variant became Dr. Eggman, continuing the fight against Sonic and his friends. Various villains, like Dr. Finitivus, Mammoth Mogul, Interjack, and Scourge would also be threats the Freedom Fighters faced as they sought to keep their loved ones and New Mobotropolis, former kingdom of Robotnik, from the villain's wrath in every adventure. In the midst of these battles, Sonic would learn to be a good friend to those who looked up to him, understand love outside of the drama, and show why he will fight for freedom no matter how dire the situation became or how powerful the bad guy was. While he retained the same attitude and speed from the games, with some comic shenanigans added for power scalers, Sonic would display a wide range of personality within his character, being an overconfident hero who often allowed his arrogance to create personal conflicts, to becoming a person willing to slow down for his friends and loved ones in their lowest moments. Many of his best moments came when he was pushed to his absolute limit, like when Sonic took on Eggman in his Ek Beater mech, and lost only for Sonic's friends to help destroy the mech later on. His fight against anti-counterpart Scourge the Hedgehog in an alternate world, or when Sonic and Sally, after multiple issues of drama, managed to finally have a quiet moment together, despite the madness of their world. being an iconic ship since the beginning. His maturing approach to stopping Eggman when many of his friends were either captured or hurt. Most of these events were written under Ian Flynn, who thanks to his run in Archie made this comic one of the most famous aspects of Sonic the Hedgehog. But unfortunately, this cycle would come to an abrupt halt after former writer Ken Penders sued both Sega and Archie for the use of his characters, a matter still shrouded in controversy to this day, forcing Archie to reboot the comic after their first crossover with Sonic and Mega Man. This left the universe in a rather shattered state, literally since the world would break apart in a Sonic Unleashed adaptation, removing many side characters that played crucial roles in Sonic's world to align more with the games, for the better and the worse. While multiple events from the games were adapted very well, much of what made Archie Sonic a legend was reduced to being Game Sonic, but in comic form. Even his relationship with Sally Acorn was erased as a part of Sega's extreme mandates to keep the brand in unity, taking away any complexity this world had before. As a result, Archie Sonic declined in sales and eventually discontinued in the summer of 2017 as the rights for Sonic walked out of Archie. However, it wasn't the end for Sonic in the comic world, but a whole new beginning, one that became more divided than ever before. With the rights handed over from Archie, Sonic's comic run would be reset to align with the games, taking place after Sonic Forces in 2017. While the Freedom Fighters and much of the Archie cast would not appear in this continuity, new characters would be introduced to fans' acclaim, and even make appearances in recent games that would cement them as new fan favorites in the franchise. Two of these characters would be Tangle the Lemur and Whisper the Wolf, who are among some of the newest Sonic characters to have gained popularity since their debut appearances, even hosting their own spin-off. They would be joined by Professor Starline, a disgraced former protege of Dr. Eggman, Mimic the Shape-Shifting Mercenary, and Belly the Tinkerer, a wooden creation from Eggman's amnesiac Mr. Tinker. Speaking of amnesia, this continuity begins with the world recovering from the war in Sonic Forces, leaving Eggman without much of his memory and Metal Sonic to control the Empire in his absence. However, thanks to Dr. Starline and a defeated Metal Sonic later on, they would bring back the Doctor to his former glory, causing one of the most horrific events in Sonic history, the Metal Virus. The Metal Virus was a creation of both Eggman and Starline, being a biological weapon that turned organic matter into a durable, yet liquidy substance, effectively turning any living being into a metal zombie. Many characters would be infected by the virus, including Sonic himself, whose speed was the only thing to keep the infection at bay for some time, while the remaining survivors made their way to Angel Island. In the midst of the chaos, Starline would bring in the Deadly Six, who would quickly turn on the Mad Doctors, only for Dr. Eggman to later betray Starline and help Sonic and the remaining survivors retrieve the Chaos Emeralds and save the world. Whew, quite a mouthful. While this arc was the big highlight for IDW Sonic, it would be the only notable arc since then, though not without consequences. Just as the Archie continuity was affected by external circumstances, the IDW continuity would show controversies coming from internal circumstances that would create multiple conflicts within the community. One of those controversies would come after Sonic's fight with Surge the Teneric, as Sonic would display his ideology of giving people the freedom to do wherever they want. Unless it is doing evil, then Sonic will just fight you. As weird as it may sound, this philosophy would be one of the defining traits of Sonic within IDW, being a hero that more often than not spared his enemies, only for those enemies to cause even more problems later on, hurting others in the process. But Sonic always wins despite the consequences. His compassion is given on a whim without considering that some of his enemies will never change, thus creating a version of Sonic that seemingly contradicts both his nature in the games as well as his previous Archie depiction of trying to protect others and not let anyone else be hurt by his actions. This issue was also present within several other game characters, with Shadow also sharing a contradictory nature that makes him more of a one-man show, ignoring his friends in Team Dark for unexplained reasons at times. As of right now, there are more characters being introduced such as Lunar, Sage Returns from Sonic Frontiers, and a mysterious villain who has yet to be revealed as of recording this. While Sonic's comic runs have not gone without issues, they are still an essential part of the franchise and a key factor into Sonic's evolution into the hero fans love, while also showing dimension in ways the games never could. Alongside his comic run, Sonic had several shows debuting within the 90s and would go on to have a show for about each decade until he would make his cinematic debut in the age of superheroes. But this did not come without a few minor changes. Being the first Sonic cartoon, Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog would be released in early 1993. Taking on a Looney Tunes style aesthetic that resembled some aspects of the games with slapstick comedy. Many of the jokes would create some of the most famous memes within the franchise. This cartoon would also give Sonic his first voice in Jaheel White, who would voice Sonic until 1999, giving the Hedgehog a can-do attitude with a hint of sass. For 65 episodes, the series would mainly focus on Sonic and Tails foiling Dr. Robotnik's schemes. And that was just about it. However, it would be the start of Sonic's potential within the landscape of TV, introducing multiple new characters, and his future debut to the silver screen. Considered one of the best of the 90s Sonic cartoons, Saturday AM is widely regarded as the more mature cartoon that introduced many famous characters that would continue into Archie comics, such as Sally Acorn, the Freedom Fighters, and Snively Robotnik. Being released mere days after Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog, the show would have a considerably darker tone, being more focused on action and drama as Sonic and his friends fought against Dr. Robotnik to free their home and loved ones from the Doctor's technical reign. Unfortunately, being the smallest of the Sonic shows from the 90s, at 26 episodes total, the show would be cancelled rather quickly after behind-the-scenes drama caused creative differences to explode during the show's run, and the ending from Season 2 to be unresolved. However, many elements from the cartoon would lay the foundation for much of Sonic's comic run in Archie, and remind fans of Sonic's more mature take in this continuity, while still having the edge and attitude of Jaheel White's voice. Overall, this series is perhaps one of the more beloved Sonic cartoons of the 90s, with a small team of fans still hoping to make the third season a reality. Being a combination of Saturday AM and Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog, Sonic Underground would focus on Sonic having two siblings that sought out their mother to save Mobius from Dr. Robotnik with their musical powers. Being the last of the 90s cartoons from 1999 to 2000, it took inspiration from Adventures of Sonic's silly humor and Saturday AM's darker tone to create more of a rock and roll music video / epic drama. The result was rather mixed in return, as while interesting concepts were shown, it lacked any coherent quality from the previous cartoons. That and Sonic Adventure was being released around this time that would end this era of cartoons. Thus, this cartoon would have the more famous cliffhanger of the siblings having never found their mother, though plans in Archie by Ian Flynn have suggested a possible ending for the show, which thankfully was restored by fans many years later, with the siblings having finally found their mother. After Sonic Adventure 2, a new cartoon would be made by TMS Entertainment, a Japanese company in 2003 who would later have 4Kids TV provide an international dub for the series, until 2006, known simply as Sonic X. Unlike the previous cartoons, Sonic would seek to align itself more so with the games, adapting both Sonic Adventure 1 and 2 with minor adjustments in between that still matched the source material. But it had a new art direction, being a full-on anime show, thus having the current voice actors from the games like Jason Griffin provide the English dub for the American release. It would follow Sonic and his friends after they are accidentally sent to Earth from a battle with Dr. Eggman, leaving them with Chris Thorndike, a very special kid who helps Sonic and friends understand Earth while saving the world. Here, Sonic would display a new kind of edge that, for many fans, matched much of his current game appearances, keeping a heroic attitude that was cocky but mostly laid back in his endeavors. However, after saving the world from perfect chaos and the Eclipse Cannon, everyone would eventually return home and find themselves traveling the cosmos to take on the Metarex, who, thanks to Cosmo, would be able to stop them with the power of the Chaos Emeralds. This show would carry perhaps one of the more lasting impacts on Sonic for its exciting action and memorable character interactions with the whole cast, from Sonic's rivalry with Shadow to Tails and Cosmo's interactions in space. But alas, this show would finish in 2006, leaving Sonic's time in TV void for some time, until 2014. After another decade of absence, a new Sonic cartoon would be made primarily in the US in 2014, creating a new continuity in the Sonic universe that lasted until 2017 due to the lack of reception and sales of the games released alongside the show's run. This cartoon would also break tradition by being the first 3D series in the franchise and have an entirely different continuity, giving the cast whole new redesigns for the show. While the new designs weren't received well at first, the show would eventually do well thanks to its sitcom format and the wild humor that always stuck the landing.
Roger.
Who's Roger? He's talking to me. Thanks, buddy. Not another speeding ticket. I'll fight it in court, but I don't think they're gonna accept gotta go fast as a medical condition.
Even the interactions with Sonic, Amy, Tails, Knuckles, and Eggman were handled well, creating some iconic moments that fans still remember to this day. In many ways, this was the only piece of the Sonic Boom continuity to have been received well, as the games and comics failed massively at the same time. Unfortunately, it would later be cancelled in 2017 after fans became extremely frustrated by the overall writing of Sonic across the franchise, leaving Sonic with only a reminder of his overly meta jokes and characterization. It would take a miracle for the franchise to regain its footing in this part of the franchise, and in 2019, it was almost a disaster to behold. While development for a Sonic film was done back in the 1990s, it took Sony, having the rights for some time, to give Paramount the green light for Sonic's first trip to the cinema, with Jeff Fowler being the director from day one. After several test footages and secret presentations, the first official trailer for Sonic the Hedgehog, scheduled for a November 2019 release, would come on April 30th, 2019. And the fans absolutely hated it. So much so that the film would be delayed for a February 2020 release, plus $5 million to redo the VFX. And luckily, Sonic's new design would gain the praise from fans in the next trailer, thanks in part to veteran artist Tyson Hess, giving the blue blurry more accurate design that matched more with the games. Even more so, the film as a whole served as a simple but fantastic start to Sonic's cinematic universe, with a young Sonic hiding on Earth for years before being hunted down by Dr. Robotnik. During the hunt, Sonic would bond with local Sheriff Tom Wachowski, becoming a father-like figure to him and finally find a family in which he belongs, igniting the heroic heart of this hedgehog. And with this newfound family, Sonic would take down Dr. Robotnik by sending him to the Mushroom Planet, saving the small town of Green Hills. Overall, this film became a major financial success, and would be the kickstart that Sonic needed after many years of mediocrity and multiple failures to finally enter the silver screen, unlocking new possibilities to explore. After the success of the first film, Paramount would continue the saga with a sequel in 2022, which included not only the introduction of Sonic's best friend Tails, but also the hot-headed Knuckles the Echidna. In this adventure, Sonic learns what it means to be a responsible hero as he travels the world with Tails, who sought to warn him about Knuckles, the last Echidna, and now mad Dr. Eggman seeking the Master Emerald. Taking more beats from the games, particularly with Sonic 3 and Knuckles, Sonic would eventually convince Knuckles of the Doctor's true intentions, joining together alongside to take on Eggman's mech. They were not only able to remove the Master Emerald from the mech, but also allowed Sonic to unleash his super form, destroying the Mad Doctor's machine, This film would prove that many elements from the games could be brought to life more so than before, while having the writing of the previous film to make Sonic and his friends more believable and perhaps some of the best characters in the series. However, the best would soon come as the tease for the next film, which sounded the arrival of one of the greatest rivals Sonic has ever known, becoming the ultimate challenge to not only Sonic's beliefs, but also his heart. Coming in several years after Sonic Boom, Sonic Prime would be released in 2022, sometime after Sonic 2, just as Sonic 3 laid on the horizon. It would focus on Sonic being trapped in the Shatterverse after shattering the Paradox Prism in a fight with Eggman, creating alternate realities with alternate versions of his friends and multiple Eggmen. During his travels, Sonic would encounter an alternate version of Tails named Nine, who became a villain after seeing Sonic as a threat thanks to his traumatic past where the blue blur never existed, causing the Fox to nearly destroy all of existence trying to make a new world. At the heart of this conflict, Sonic finds himself shrouded in guilt for having caused this disaster in the first place, especially after being confronted by a surviving Shadow. This also sparked massive criticism as this Sonic has no signs of character growth and more often than not makes the same mistakes as before, contradicting his game counterpart in several respects. Thus, while this show did introduce the multiverse in an interesting light, it was panned widely for its lack of character consistency, despite having spectacular visuals and great action set pieces. And memes, who could forget? Being perhaps one, if not the greatest video game movie of all time, Sonic 3 would bring in Shadow the Hedgehog to do an adaptation of Sonic Adventure 2, and make perhaps the best Sonic story in cinematic history yet. Through the return of Shadow in Tokyo, the revelation of Joe Robotnik's absence, and the near death of Tom, Sonic faces the final test of being a hero, making the right choice when it matters the most. And for the blue blur, he almost fails after being consumed by vengeance against Shadow for injuring Tom, facing the black and red hedgehog in his super form despite the warnings from his friends. This escalated into one of the greatest fights the series ever had, with both hedgehogs embracing their super forms, shaking the world with each punch until Sonic defeats Shadow in one final strike to the moon. With a fist raised and another pinning the rival down, Sonic was ready to end Shadow's life in the same rage Shadow has below him. Until he pauses, remembering Tom's words, and spares the hedgehog's life. This act of mercy not only redeems Shadow from his path of revenge, but also keeps Sonic's heart from the darkness within, allowing them to watch the sun rise with newfound peace. But when the time came to stop the Eclipse Cannon from firing upon Earth, both Sonic and Shadow dabbed up to live and learn, hanging on the edge of tomorrow as they blocked the cannon's blast in trade, leaving Sonic to fall back down to the Earth's surface. Luckily, his friends catch him just in time as Eggman and Shadow sacrifice themselves to save the world. In return, Sonic would ride off with his friends once again, only to be lost on the outskirts of New York, where he would be ambushed by several metal duplicates, and a pink hedgehog with a massive hammer awaiting the next adventure. Announced shortly before the release of Sonic 3, the next film teased the arrival of two iconic characters in the form of Amy Rose, who is being voiced by Christian Bale, and Metal Sonic, with only speculation as to if he will have a voice or not. With rumors that the story could take major elements from Sonic CD and Sonic Heroes, many hope that this movie will explore time travel as teased in concept art, and perhaps even have a romantic story between the two hedgehogs, as many have imagined after so many years of chasing and teasing. But for now, only time will tell. Out of the three hedgehogs, Sonic's story has taken perhaps the most dramatic turns over the course of 35 years. From being a gaming icon that fought to survive both the dark and meta times of gaming, a comic hero facing either crazy villains or ideological differences, to a speeding blue blur that soared past the small screen to become a cinema legend. But in many ways, that is just who he is.
What you see is what you get. Just a guy that loves adventure. I'm Sonic the Hedgehog!
The ultimate life form. Faker. Project Shadow. Created by forces of the past, Shadow the Hedgehog is one of the most iconic antagonists and protagonists in Sonic history, making him a hero among fans for his tragic story and his rough ride into redemption from the stories of the meta era. He is a character that rose to be a legend. In 2001, the Sonic brand was about to lose the console wars after the Sega Dreamcast failed to perform against the might of the Nintendo GameCube, Xbox, and PlayStation. But in this fight, a new character would be made. In what was meant to be a one-and-done appearance, sparked a new story that would make Shadow a household name. After the success of Sonic Adventure, Sega would begin a follow-up that would explore the themes of good and evil, creating an alternate Sonic that would be similar in looks but opposite in nature. One of the earliest names of this character was Terios, being Japanese for reflection of. However, it was later changed by Shiro Maekawa to be Shadow the Hedgehog, with his final design being finalized soon after. Then, on June 18th, 2001, as Sega made their final stand in the console wars, Sonic Adventure 2 would debut with critical acclaim, becoming one of the most iconic Sonic games in history. It would also be Shadow's grand reveal to the world, which found his character tragic but a memorable protagonist that would find redemption with Sonic and his friends, remembering the promise to his best friend Maria Robotnik to protect the Earth, stopping the Eclipse cannon from crashing towards Earth. In the process of saving the world, Shadow the Hedgehog would seemingly plummet back to Earth, and that was the end of his story. Or was it? As it turned out, just like the Dreamcast was the last console from Sega, Shadow's first and last appearance was meant to be in this game. But thanks to fan outcry for Shadow's return, the Hedgehog would be brought back for another adventure in Sonic Heroes. Having been found in a sleeping pod, Shadow would wake up without most of his memories, having to team up with Rouge the Bat and E123 Omega to help Team Sonic defeat Metal Overlord. While the rest of the heroes departed on good terms, Shadow left on his own to figure out who he truly was, wandering the world until the arrival of the Black Arms in his solo game Shadow the Hedgehog in 2005. Unlike Sonic's adventures, Shadow's tale would take on a much darker tone compared to previous entries, even incorporating elements considered inappropriate for the series. This led to Shadow's journey of regaining his memories through various paths of good and evil, often having friends and enemies help him collect the Chaos Emeralds in ways that often displayed his ruthless nature, while also signs of his moral code that slowly unveils once he regains his memories of Maria and discovers his true origin from Black Doom. This would be one of the biggest highlights for Shadow, both good and bad. On one hand, it gave Shadow much needed growth for his character, having finally resolved his tragic past after destroying Black Doom and the Black Comet with the Eclipse cannon. But the game would suffer from terrible controls and mechanics, as well as unfavorable reception for its mature tone that contrasted with the rest of the franchise. As a result, it would become a rather mixed title for having a great story but terrible gameplay. But nothing would hurt Shadow more than the next game that sought to go back to the adventure roots he came from, Sonic 06. While Sonic 06 would be considered one of the worst Sonic games ever made, one of the better parts often remembered fondly is Shadow's story, which had him take on Mephiles the Dark, an enemy unintentionally created through time travel and a major accident in the past, becoming one of the most powerful villains in Sonic history. Being the dark half of the demigod Solaris, Mephiles sought to reunite with his lighter half known as Iblis, together consuming all of time itself until nothing remained. He took on Shadow's form to deceive Silver, and later tried to convince Shadow to join his side, knowing the Hedgehog's future would have left him to be blamed for the destruction of the future. However, Shadow saw through his lies, and with Sonic and Silver, they would eventually take down the demigod, saving time from darkness. But it would not save the franchise, as it would leave Shadow absent for some time after 2006, having only several cameos in the Riders and Rival games, but never a full story for him. That is, until Sonic Generations arrived. In 2011, Shadow would return to the Sonic franchise as a main rival to the Blue Blur in Sonic Generations, later cheering on both Sonics in the fight against the Time Eater. From that game onward, Shadow wasn't truly the same. He acted more as a lone wolf that was more often than not portrayed more as an edgy protagonist, lacking the stoic and complex nature from his early appearances. This was apparent in Sonic Boom: Rise of Lyric and Sonic Forces, as he treated Sonic and his friends with major disrespect, lacking any care for anyone other than himself.
Saving the world? You? Don't make me laugh.
Even his team with Rouge and Omega is barely there by his side, and for the most part, he rarely acknowledges them. It emphasized the writing problems for Shadow and Sonic in the meta era, replacing the complex nature of his former self with a shallow alter ego that never seemed to fit in. Many didn't know if Shadow would ever have the same character development as he once did long ago in Sonic Adventure 2, Shadow the Hedgehog, and Sonic 06. Until a recent remaster would bring Shadow back not only for the silver screen, but to tell a story we never saw. After being absent for several years and with Sonic 3 teasing his arrival to the silver screen, a story would follow Shadow's time in white space during the events of Sonic Gens, exploring Shadow's past once more as old friends and enemies would return thanks to the Time Meter resurrecting different aspects of the Hedgehog's past. Among them were his lost friend Maria Robotnik and Professor Gerald Robotnik, who made a deal with Black Doom long ago to create the Ultimate Warrior in exchange for finding a cure for Maria's disease through Shadow. Through his conception, Shadow would be able to obtain Doom powers, which he gains during his time in white space, racing across worlds both familiar and unknown, while fighting against enemies from his past, including ones that were long since forgotten. Along the way, he would learn to finally move on from his past, not letting his anger control him as he sought to keep Maria's wish for everyone to be happy. Not only did this tale restore Shadow's reputation, but also restored the heart Shadow once had in his early appearances, making him the Hedgehog fans loved, while being the shadow that followed the light. Sometime after his debut in Sonic Adventure 2, Shadow would later arrive in the world of Archie Sonic, carrying the same backstory as he did in the games, but his journey afterwards took a different turn. Beginning in Archie Sonic issue 98, Shadow's story from SA2 would be adapted to fit the world of comics. But in issues 124 and 125 would be where Shadow's story truly begins in the world of Archie Sonic. Having saved the world from the Eclipse Cannon, Shadow would find himself rescued by the Bem, an alien race that helped the Hedgehog keep his super form long enough to warn the rest of Mobius of the coming Zorda, who long ago wiped out humanity and sought to return once more to finish the rest of the planet. After helping Sonic and the Freedom Fighters take on the Zorda, Shadow would go on his own to seek out the rest of his past, which the comics deviated several times but held to similar elements, except his relationship with Maria, which wasn't fully fleshed out until a few issues later, where he would find a disc from his creator. From there, he would access the disc through a simulation that had both Gerald Robotnik and Maria together, explaining to the Hedgehog that he was created to be the savior of Mobius, making a new promise to Maria in his heart to protect everyone. This would bring out a heroic side that was confident in who he was, respecting others including Sonic, and in some cases a side of mercy for rogue creations of Eggman. However, he would often find his ideals tested at times when others see him as simply following orders versus doing the right thing. It would stem from the idea that he is the ultimate life form, a protector without mistakes, which in this continuity isn't always the case, as he fought enemies with similar power and on occasions lost. But in the midst of this internal conflict, none have shown him more respect than Sonic, who treats him more like an old friend in their interactions, which is rarely seen outside this comic. And something that is not often discussed is his connection to Hope Robotnik, a relative of Eggman that resembled Maria, who encourages him not to let his failures define him, just as he encouraged her to do the same. Now, unlike Sonic, Shadow wouldn't have much focus within the comics, especially after the reboot removed much of this development to make him align more so with the games, including adapting parts of his solo game to create 2 new villains that were ultimately forgotten once Archie Sonic was cancelled. This Shadow represented an era fans grew to love the Hedgehog, and wished to see more of when the comic had reached its end. However, he was never truly the same when he joined Sonic in the IDW. In the IDW comics, Shadow would retain more of his personality from his games, which at this time was a part of the meta era taking place after Sonic Forces. From there, he would display many characteristics that often associated him with his game counterpart in regards to having very inconsistent writing, portraying the heroic Hedgehog as a self-righteous edgelord, putting down his friends and letting his ego get in the way of helping others. A main example of this is during the Metal Virus arc, where the Hedgehog would take on a swarm of Zombots despite the warnings and let his arrogance get the best of him, becoming infected as a result. Once he was cured, he would reflect briefly on this moment alone, realizing his mistake took him out of the fight when he could have avoided the infection. However, over the course of the comic, Shadow would later join Team Dark once again on different quests, from stopping an avalanche, destroying the city of Chaos Power, fighting the Babylon Rogues, to hunting for the missing Chaos Emeralds. While the Ultimate Lifeform had a rough start within IDW, he would eventually improve over time to become the character fans know, though still carrying the flaws that made him contrast in the games. Before Shadow became famous through the Sonic cinematic universe, he began alongside Sonic in the anime cartoon known as Sonic X, which paved the way for much of his TV and movie adaptations down the road. Shadow's rise to fame outside the games began in Sonic X, where in one season much of SA2 was adapted in order to bring Shadow on TV. He and Sonic would receive the same voice actor in Jason Griffith, who would voice them in a few games around this time. Much like Sonic Adventure 2, Shadow would be awoken from Dr. Eggman, seeking revenge for the death of Maria by using the space colony Ark to destroy the world. However, instead of being lost on Earth, Shadow would find himself in Sonic's world, mainly in the outer edges of space, later joining the rest of the group to take on the Meta-Rex. This was considered one of the best adaptations of the Hedgehog, as his character matched up with the games in both tragedy and complexity for his honor to fulfill Maria's wish to bring hope and happiness to humanity. Just as Sonic suffered from corny writing, Shadow would later have a similar issue in Sonic Boom, having much of his early personality numbed down in favor of being labeled an edgelord like that of his current game counterpart. Appearing in both seasons for only a few episodes, he had the reputation for lacking the compelling backstory that made him famous, being relegated to a secondary antagonist in the show that mocked Sonic and his friends often for no reason. Unfortunately, this characterization stayed with Shadow for some time, even after the show ended, leaving his future uncertain when it came time to join Sonic Prime. With the hype of Sonic 3 on the horizon, Shadow would later join Sonic in the Netflix show, bearing more of his early personality to that of his early appearances, This is where the Latium memes originated from. He would help Sonic find the missing pieces of the Paradox Prism after a brief fight, saving his life when the multiverse was about to collapse. Despite showing some hostility, he would reluctantly team up with Sonic, having the Blue Blur face the consequences of his actions after destroying the Paradox Prism. This was one of the best highlights of the show, as it brought back Shadow out of his antagonistic side to become more akin to what fans know him to be, even when the darkness sought to creep in. Alongside Shadow Generations, Shadow would receive his own mini-show in the form of a 3-part YouTube special that highlights Shadow's past in a blend of 2D and 3D animation. From his time on the Ark to his journey in space, Shadow would remember his experiences with Maria through dreams and nightmares that revealed the possible return of Black Doom. In this emotional journey, the Hedgehog sought to find the enemy that plagued his past, remembering the times Maria comforted him when he doubted his worth. These memories flow as he joins up with Team Dark to infiltrate a gun base, taking a space rocket leading up to the events of Shadow Generations. This animation was considered a stellar masterpiece for both its visuals and brief story, making it one of the best prologue stories in the franchise, sparking new animations to come. After a 2-year wait, Shadow would arrive in the 3rd installment of the Sonic Cinematic Universe, becoming the new antagonist and protagonist in the film. His story would begin at Prison Island off of Tokyo Bay, Japan, where he would break out of his containment to unleash his wrath against Gun, the military program that locked him away for 50 years. Shadow would also take down Team Sonic with no struggle, with Sonic only able to keep up for a brief moment before being defeated in a quick clash in the sky. His origin in this story, however, changes in several respects, having been found long ago by Gun for top-secret experiments, eventually finding friendship with Maria Robotnik, who would be killed by accident when Gun soldiers set off chaos drives, creating an explosion that took the only friend Shadow ever had in one moment. Thus, the Hedgehog sought out revenge, reuniting with Joe Robotnik to seek out the keys to the greatest weapon ever made, the Eclipse Cannon. Snatching one of the keys from Team Sonic, Shadow would join the Mad Doctors as they infiltrated the gun base in London. As Shadow arrives, he quickly crosses paths with Commander Walters, the man who locked him away for the accident in the past. And with one punch, he knocks out the Commander cold, taking the final key. Except, it wasn't Walters. It was Tom Wachowski. Unaware that the real Walters died earlier, Shadow stood by in shock, watching as Sonic rushed to Tom's side with the same concern the Hedgehog once had for Maria long ago. However, as revenge returned to his mind, he gave the final key to both Robotniks, launched the Eclipse Cannon for all to feel his loss and despair. He watched from the superweapon after charging it with chaos power, awaiting the time to finally avenge his friend's death, only for a golden light to snatch him right out of the space station. To his surprise, Supersonic now held him by the chest, pulling both of them back to Earth for one final confrontation. However, upon their return, Shadow managed to knock Sonic out of his super form, allowing himself to share the power of the Master Emerald, clashing across the globe in streaks of light. In the midst of the fight, he would be sent straight to the moon, being pinned down by the triumphant Sonic, egging him on to finish him off. But instead, Sonic chooses to spare him, reminding him of the words Maria once spoke to him.
The light shines even though the star is gone.
With a newfound purpose, Shadow helped Sonic stop the Eclipse Cannon, sacrificing himself to save the world. This became one of the best adaptations Shadow has ever had, leaving an open door for more to come. Having gone through pain and suffering, Shadow the Hedgehog became one of the most memorable characters in Sonic history. Through his dark origin as a weapon, his path from revenge to his heroic resolution, and his redemption through the silver screen, made this hedgehog the true ultimate life form, the hedgehog of the future,
It's no use!
or a hedgehog out of time. Unlike the hedgehogs before him, Silver was never given the proper spotlight as Shadow, but he shared the same problems in writing and public perception with Sonic, being naive in one story, but heroic in the other. However, his journey into newfound fame was the toughest story of them all. Unlike Shadow's debut in Sonic Adventure 2, Silver would debut in Sonic the Hedgehog 2006, at the expense of rough development and mixed reception. From a world destroyed by flames many years into the future, a lone hedgehog with powers of telekinesis roamed the land in search of the reason why the flames destroyed the world, accompanied by Blaze the cat to fight off a being known as Iblis, the flames of disaster. No matter what they did, the being could never be defeated in their own strength, frustrating Silver having to live in a world filled only by flames and desolation. There was nothing he could do, until a strange figure emerged, offering them a chance to stop Iblis from ever existing. He proposed that in order to prevent the disaster that unleashed Iblis, he would have to eliminate the one they called the Iblis Trigger. Not knowing his full mission, Silver and Blaze would be sent to the past, seeking out the one who was responsible for their future's destruction. From there, the hedgehog would be fascinated by this time, with a forest full of life and a sky still blue, which he had never seen before. But as he was close to finding the Iblis Trigger, he would be found by Amy Rose, mistaking him for another hedgehog she admired, forcing Silver to join her as they sought out this Sonic. Unbeknownst to him, Sonic was the person who was shown to be the Iblis Trigger, who he tried to kill once only to be stopped by Amy, finding himself questioning if taking one life was worth saving the whole world. He would soon receive an answer from Shadow the Hedgehog, losing to him after trying to kill Sonic again to find that he was being manipulated by Mephiles the Dark, the missing half of Solaris, who took on Shadow's form to deceive him in unintentionally setting off the real Iblis Trigger, Princess Elise. Through a trip to the past, Silver would witness Iblis being sealed in Elise long ago by her father, with a vow to never cry lest her tears call forth the flames from within. Having understood what he must do to truly save the world, he returned to the present to help Sonic rescue Elise, and later returned to the future with Blaze to end the flames of disaster once and for all. However, after failing to seal Iblis within himself, Blaze would sacrifice herself to seal the flames, leaving Silver alone in a future saved and a broken heart. When it came time to face Solaris, Silver would join Sonic and Shadow as they together took down the Sun God. But, as many fans know, this would result in the event being entirely erased, and thus, Silver's story, his naivety, his compassion, and his deeds were forgotten. It didn't help that since 06 was received as a critical failure, Silver was since seen as one of the weakest parts of 06, for being easily deceived by an obvious villain, and for being a terrible boss fight. This reputation continued to spiral for much of his appearances afterwards, especially after 06. Silver would return to join Sonic and Shadow in the smaller story of Sonic Rivals, having no memories of 06, but coming from the same future of destruction. Only this time, he tracks down Eggman Nega, a multiversal descendant from the future that sought to cause chaos through trapping people in cards, or kidnapping Chow for his own purposes. This would repeat many elements from 06 regarding his arrival from a desolated future, to him finding Sonic and Shadow to find the one responsible for his future. He would also lack the optimism and naivety that made his character unique in favor of a more aggressive personality that was willing to fight rather than cooperate. However, Many fans appreciated his team-up with Espio and Rivals 2, as both of them quickly trusted each other to take down Eggman Nega, becoming great friends afterwards. Unfortunately, this didn't help Silver escape the shadow of his origin game, eventually joining the meta era at the worst of times. One of the next appearances would be in Sonic Colors, more precisely, the DS version, which had him meet Sonic, Tails, and Blaze at Sweet Mountain. While he has no memories of meeting Blaze, there is a moment where he seems to recall a familiar connection between each other, though this was never resolved in the story. His next true mainline appearance in Sonic Forces was remembered as one of the worst appearances of the future Hedgehog, which was famous for cementing him as another Hedgehog to be passed around in both writing and story. Silver would be a part of a small freedom fighting group known as the Resistance, being formed after Eggman captured Sonic and conquered the world with Infinite the Jackal, who wielded the Phantom Ruby. With this power, Infinite was able to defeat Sonic, and after a quick tussle in Mystic Jungle, beat Silver with quick ease, despite facing enemies on a similar scale. But what was considered the worst part of Silver's character, apart from his inclusion in the story, was one singular line.
I'm an optimist, but I'm also a realist.
How could Silver, a character known for his optimism, be considered a realist? This contradictory style of writing was shared with Sonic and Shadow in the same game, making Silver arguably one of the most useless characters in the franchise. Then one may ask if redemption is possible for someone who has been written into obscurity. But thanks to fans, there is. After years of constant jokes and ridicule, Silver would find a surprising source of popularity in one of the most unlikely games in the franchise, Sonic Racing Crossworlds. And it wasn't so much the story as was the interactions between Sage and Eggman that fans found a return to form for the Hedgehog, igniting new interest in the character that wasn't seen before. Multiple pieces of fan art and fan games would emerge to tell a possible future in which Silver fought against the remnants of the Eggman Empire, ruled by Sage. It's here that Silver's redemption was born, not so much by the inconsistent stories of the past, but by the hope of the future fans have created. Much like Shadow, Silver would arrive in Archie Sonic not long after his game debut, having the least amount of changes to his origin, at least for some time. In 2009, just a few years after 06, Silver would enter Archie Sonic in issue 194, as Sonic, Shadow, and several other Hedgehogs would enter a battle for a broken world. But Silver didn't come to save the day as his primary task, for it was to destroy the traitor that would ruin his future, in a similar manner to his role in 06. However, after meeting Sonic and helping him stop Scourge, he would find his first lead of Sonic being the traitor a mission failure, forcing him to return to the future to continue his research. Then, he would enter an alternate future 30 years from the present, saving King Sonic and Queen Sally from the Dark Presence, a remnant of the Dark Legion that sought to bring back former King Shadow to rule the world. However, in bringing the Hedgehog back, he would unleash Tikos, the combination of Tikal and perfect chaos, to punish the world for his exile. Luckily, Silver would join the fight to help Sonic and his family defeat the water monster, saving this timeline from disaster, though not being able to find the traitor. This would lead him back to the present, this time looking for Rotor Wallace, formerly Boomer, as the possible traitor of the Freedom Fighters. On his journey, however, he would be persuaded by Rotor to save his family from mind control, thus saving an entire Walrus herd from mind control, saving the day once again. Silver would later return to his time to train with an older Mammoth Mogul, sensing an intruder from another time that dragged Silver into an alternate future controlled and desolated by Enerjack. Seeking to help the surviving freedom fighters defeat the demigod, Silver realizes that he couldn't abuse his power, but also the need to be ready to help others when they needed him most, changing the course of his life forever. After doing more research to find the traitor of the freedom fighters, but this time under his master's orders, he was not to return unless he was successful in his mission. With that, he headed off back to the present, where Sally Acorn was roboticized, and Anton was left in a coma, saving Sally's brother and his family. Assuming Anton was the traitor, Silver was quickly dragged by the quills by Sonic to the hospital, finding all his assumptions fail right in front of him, and rejected by Sonic, who was in no position to argue. Stranded, Silver finds himself lost with no leads, wondering where to go until he is found by Harvey Hu, the leader of the secret freedom fighters that worked in the shadows to take down King Ixis Nagus. Through small missions to stop the corrupt king, Silver will be able to help St. Geoffrey return to his senses, while Mr. Hu helped him figure out the traitor of the freedom fighters. To his surprise, it was none other than Sally Acorn. The reason for this was that there were little records of Sally's roboticization, that the future was not caused by a malicious act so much as it was a selfless sacrifice that unfortunately resulted in her committing evil acts not of her free will. However, he would find the world being reset as soon as he tried to rescue her, resulting in his arc of learning what it meant to be a hero, to be lost. Following the reboot, Silver's story would be altered to come from a dystopian future ruled by the Onyx City Council, teaming up with Professor Von Schelmer and Gold the Tenric to stop Genesis portals from unleashing monsters upon the world. His last adventure in Archie would have him, the Professor, and Gold be sucked into a Genesis portal as the comic reached its end, leaving his new arc unfinished. Or was it? Silver's arc would be abruptly halted as he would also join Sonic in IDW. But whereas the other hedgehogs would retain the writing from the meta era for some time, Silver's character was altered to have more traits similar to his early appearances, as well as his most recent appearances. For one, he would arrive from a future covered in metal, seeking to find a way to change the past by helping Sonic take down whatever threats created his future. Another would be his close bonds with Whisper the Wolf, Blaze, and Espio, which demonstrated how he had the same heart and skill as Sonic and Shadow, but struggled with anxiety that more often than not made him isolated and afraid of lacking purpose in life when the world was safe. These doubts arrived despite his heroics within the multiple battles throughout this continuity, from saving everyone in the Battle for Angel Island, teaming up with Sonic to destroy the metal virus, helping everyone destroy Egg Imperial City, and uncovering Mimic's infiltration in the Diamond Cutters. This Silver also greatly differed compared to his Archie depiction, by not necessarily being overconfident in saving the day, so much as he was determined to be a noble hero, apart from the hedgehogs around him. In a way, this IDW continuity continued a lost side of Silver that more often than not was overdone in the games or written out in previous stories. His optimism, a trait once seen in 06, living on through the comics, and slowly returning to the games. Silver is the only hedgehog out of the three here not to appear in any TV show or movie, though rumors of his eventual arrival have been spoken about since Sonic 3. Despite the mistakes of his past, Silver the Hedgehog has gone a long way to rise alongside Sonic and Shadow with both fan acclaim and respect for the accomplishments he has made, and many hope that one day the Hedgehog's dream of absolution will finally come to pass, becoming the hero he was meant to be. All three hedgehogs share one world, but each one has their own story to tell. Whether it be fighting the schemes of a mad conqueror, seeking to right the wrongs of the past, or help to save the future, They each have a legacy that made them iconic in the Sonic community.